Good afternoon and welcome. My name's Lee Biggington. I'm the co-founder and COO of Nephos Technologies. Today, I'm going to be talking through the results of our recent independent market research study on data governance. As part of the session, I'm going to walk through a little quick introduction into Nephos Technologies for those of you that don't know us. I'm going to talk through a little bit about the market dynamics and how we see that today. And then I'm going to walk through some of the results and findings from our recent data governance market research study before concluding with a little summary of the service-led approach that Nephos have developed in this space. So to begin with, who are we? Who are Nephos? So Nephos Technologies are a consultancy-led data services integrator, and we're working with customers of all different shapes and sizes, really helping them to solve some of those complex data challenges that they suffer from today. As we all know, data is at the heart of pretty much most things these days for most enterprises. And effectively what we found is that the organizations are really struggling to unlock the value that data has. So from our perspective, what we do is we help those customers to understand what that capability is, how they can execute on those services, and really help them guide them through the end-to-end process. Now, our work itself cuts across three discipline areas, if you like. The first is around storage and processing. So how do we store, process, protect more data, because ultimately that's what we're all driving towards, in a more efficient way. So if you look at the likes of Genomics England, for example, who are one of our customers, for those guys, it was all about being able to scale that environment to enable their researchers to perform against larger data sets without the silos and constant data management that comes with that. So that's one area that we work in. And that's really one of the foundational things that organizations suffer with today. The next is all around data governance. So really there we're looking at how do we help customers kind of make sure that the data that they have is being handled correctly. And also as part of that, make sure that the right elements of data governance are in place, things like data quality and data lineage, to again help them make sure that the data they're working with is accurate and not in a place where it's going to really slow down their ability to run analytics workflows against them. For example, the third area is all around data services. So once we've done these things, how do we open up those data sets to a broader audience and make it more available in a secure and governed fashion so that we can actually drive some value there? We engage our customers all the way through from that development of the strategy in the first place, through integration and program delivery, to fully managed kind of operational services and anywhere in between. And that approach has yielded great success for us as a business. So our revenue growth and our customer retention are both extremely strong, and those things have led us to be recognized on the FT 1000 for the past 2 years running. So I think we're in a unique position to help support customers across the board there. So if we dig into the survey findings, as I mentioned before, one of our key focus areas is data governance. And like all things, we like to become expert in our field where we can. So we commissioned a third-party organization to conduct an independent market research study into the overall state of data governance today. And that's what I'm going to dive into now. Now, before we go into that in too much detail, one of the things that I thought would be worth doing in terms of level set is really just to establish what data governance really means, because quite often people have different opinions and different views across organisations as to what it really means. Now, according to the Data Governance Institute, data governance is a system of decision rights, accountabilities for information-related processes executed according to agreed-upon models which describe who can take what actions with what information and when, under what circumstances, using what methods. Even reading it out loud, it sounds complicated. It sounds fluid, and it's very much open to interpretation. As far as we're concerned, ultimately data is at the heart of most things. And this is really all about getting the right people, process, and technology in place to help you manage your data effectively so that you can actually drive some value from it. That's what we take it to mean. Within that overall governance arena, there are a number of component parts. So whether that's discovery and classification, data cataloging, quality, lineage, the list goes on really. But as far as we see it, it's the combination of that people, process, and technology to then bring those things together in one cohesive manner. Now, part of the reason that we embarked on this research study was really to kind of prove to an extent as well what we thought we already knew before we started in this space. So we felt that data governance generally was pretty slow, manual process. We felt that it lacked accuracy. So if you look at a lot of traditional tooling out there, it's very regex based, which at best you're going to get 80% accuracy from. In reality, it's very rare that you see people achieve that. And ultimately, it takes a lot of time, money, and people to get those things right. Now, when we look at that, the other challenge that we have is organizations are trying to do this against the backdrop of insane data growth. We're creating more data than ever before at unstoppable rates. And realistically, those data elements that we're storing and processing are being stored in more diverse locations as well. Whether that's geographically, whether it's systems, the list goes on really. It's an extremely complicated area for organizations to get to grips with. That's what we thought we knew. So what we wanted to do was effectively conduct this research study to see whether we were right. And if we weren't right, to learn and understand additional areas that kind of come into the mix there and into the conversation with these organizations. So as part of what we did, we surveyed 300 end user organizations across C-suite decision makers, so CISOs, CIOs, and CDOs in this demographic of organizations. So you'll see here ranging anywhere from realistically £1 million of revenue upwards, beyond the 500 million revenue mark, and anywhere from 1,000 users and above. So we wanted to capture quite a broad cross-section of the industry, but predominantly focused on those more enterprise organizations. Now, when we look at the market itself, what was clear is that this data governance market is huge and growing. So McKinsey recently, there's two stats here from McKinsey that I've used. One is the estimated market value, so 5.28 billion by 2026. That represents effectively a 20% year-on-year growth, pretty consistently. So we know the market is vast, and actually, more anecdotally, when we speak to customers day to day, this is becoming really part of the forefront of their data strategy, and as a result, their business strategy. So that's one part of it. The average annual spend on governance programs by mid-sized businesses, anywhere between $17 and $40 million. Now, in reality, when we talk to organisations, particularly in the mid-size and the mid-tier, they're nowhere near that number. And this is kind of one of the things that stood out to me when we had the results back was, you know, this is essentially what mid-sized businesses are spending, but in most cases they're underfunded and under-resourced, and they're nowhere near that figure. The other thing that was quite interesting was the length of time to deliver, and this is kind of a common theme. But out of the people that we surveyed, or the research organisation surveyed, over half of those felt that it was going to take at least 12 months to start delivering value from a program such as this. All that being said, 98% of the respondents have an active, funded data governance program in place. So what does that mean? Well, it means we know that it's important. We know that there is budget being spent in these areas. We know it's a time-consuming effort for organisations, but also it's critical. It's a critical part of the strategy, and everyone is moving towards this model. Everyone is trying to deliver. So why? Why are we trying to do this? Why are organisations trying to adopt better data governance? Well, through the survey that we conducted, we asked the question, what business impact would you like to see from your governance program, right? What I found really interesting about this is the split. So I've picked out the top 5 responses here, but across the board, there was roughly a 50-50 split between those respondents that had identified areas like minimizing financial risk, like compliance with regulatory requirements, that were very much on the side of control and security. That kind of information security angle whereby, you know, typically driven by legislative or regulatory compliance needs. So whether it's GDPR, CCPA, you know, whatever it may be. The other 50% identified areas such as higher quality of analytics, efficiency, cost reduction, data quality improvements, which lean more towards the value creation aspect. So really what we're talking about here is the fact that, yeah, you know what, we've got to make sure that our house is in order, that we're securing our data correctly, that we're handling our data correctly, and that is a huge part of what we need to do. But in doing so, we're actually able to open up and start beginning to drive some value. We want to be able to unlock the value from our data assets that we have. We can't do that if we don't have the right governance in place. As an example, if you look at data quality, so on your screen now, you'll see that improved data quality is one of the highest, or if not the highest, response from people. And it's very simple, really. If we don't maintain good data quality and we use our data to run analytics models, for example, if the data that we use is fundamentally flawed, that is inaccurate or out of date or mismatched, the output that we create from that work is highly likely to be that also. It's going to be inaccurate. And that's a huge problem for organizations today. We want to generate this value, but again, if we don't have the right things in place, we're effectively wasting our money. You know, the output that we deliver is not going to be accurate and it's not going to be fit for purpose. That's a huge problem for organizations today. So if I move on from there, you know, what's stopping people from delivering? What's the big challenge that organizations have? Again, I've picked out the top 3 here. So the biggest barriers typically across the board. The first one was around tooling. So again, very, very common occurrence when we talk to customers. Organizations don't have the right level of tools in place to deliver effective data governance. Now, why is that? What's the real issue here? Well, I think there are a number, if I'm honest. So if I look at this generically, quite often organizations have bought tool set after tool set after tool set to cover the various different disciplines that sit within that governance framework. So, for example, quite often we find an organization has a data catalog in place, maybe from the likes of Calibra as an example. We have a data lineage tool from, whether it's Monte Carlo, whether it's Manta, whatever it might be. We have data quality tools. We have tools around access control. We have all of these different things that we buy at a point in time to do a job. But they do their own job. They don't typically do other things. We have the sprawl. Now, if you go back to what I was saying earlier and you marry that against the fact that we have this really dynamic changing landscape of data volumes and the diverse nature of the data sets that we're holding, that's not going to change. If anything, it's going to get worse. So what organizations can't do is keep buying a tool set after tool set after tool set to go and try and deliver one singular governance program, because none of these things talk to each other effectively. So to me, that's what we can draw from that. That's why effective tooling is a problem. It really struggles, the tools struggle to keep up. And there isn't one tool to rule them all, for want of a better way of putting it, if anyone's watching the Lord of the Rings series. So that's the first problem. The second problem, which is huge right now, and every CIO, CTO, CDO that I speak to raises this as a challenge, is having the right skill sets for the job. There are, as we all know, salaries in this area and IT in general, actually, data in general are rising. They continue to rise. That doesn't mean there's any more talent out there, and it doesn't mean the market is any easier to deal with when it comes to, one, bringing in new talent, and two, retaining it. So a lot of organizations are really struggling with having the right skill sets in place to manage all of this mess, really. Like I say, a huge challenge. It's on the top of most people's agenda these days. So I don't see that changing either right now until we have some wholesale change as to how we adopt new talent. The last piece is around exec support. So a little over a third of those that responded felt that they didn't have the right level or the requisite level of exec support when it comes to running these programs. Now, we know, if I pull back a couple of slides, that 98% of those people that responded have a program in place, a budgeted program in place. So to me, that tells me that the funding that is available is not adequate to do the job. Now, in part, I think there is, again, anecdotally speaking to organizations and various people, I think there is a big challenge with the legacy of how these programs were positioned historically. And this comes back down as well to that split that I talked about earlier in terms of the value creation aspect versus the data protection aspect. We need both. I think if we look at a business case for data governance generally, if protecting our data is critical, both in terms of brand and maintaining our brand reputation, but also by the same token, making sure that we're complying to things like GDPR or CCPA or whatever those regulatory and compliance challenges are, right? So that's absolutely one part of the problem. The other is all around the fact that actually we need to position these things as a value creation tool. It needs to be part of that value creation stack. So what I mean by that is that, again, going back to the point I made earlier, if we don't do these things, if we don't have good governance and the business is asking us to leverage our data to drive value, whether it's customer insight or whatever it might be, it's very, very difficult for us to do that if that data is poor. So being able to put a tangible cost benefit to that governance program is a critical aspect. And it's something that I think we all need to get better at doing, generally speaking, to drive that exec support. If in the boardroom they understand that data is key and that governance is a critical part of unlocking that, then we're much more likely to get the support that we need at that level. The crazy thing for me really is that only a third of those respondents felt they were getting any value from the data governance programs. But I think that's a culmination of all of these other items that we've talked about so far. So if I look at that, what's the answer? Well, for a lot of the organizations, 3/4 of those that responded felt that a service-led approach was a way to speed up adoption and time to value. We want value faster from our investment. And quite often that tail, if you like, that the length of time it takes to get through this super manual process of adopting good governance is also a real inhibitor. When we have a budgeted program, it's very rare that the organization doesn't want to see some sort of value back in a reasonably prompt time. So being able to speed up adoption, being able to onboard faster, again, anecdotally, when we work with customers, one of the biggest challenges is getting data into these platforms in the first place. It's onboarding. It's a real challenge for people to understand what data they've got in the first place, to know where to prioritize and where to ingest the right data sets, all with the purpose of driving more value faster from their governance strategy or the governance program. So what have we done? What have we done to try and improve this? So as an organization, as an integrator, we see these challenges. We understand that they exist. So what we've effectively done is create our own data governance as a service offering. And really that's designed to combine people, process and platforms, the things that I spoke about earlier, to enable you to operationalize that data governance program of yours and speed up time to value. Really, that's the goal of what we're looking to achieve. We want to be able to onboard data sources faster, at bigger scale, with more diversity, and we want to be able to leverage that to unlock the value in our data assets. So what does it mean? What does all that mean? So I'm not going to read through all of these aspects, but effectively there are 4 areas that we as an organization help with. The first is around people and process. So this is all about helping our customers to understand where the value lies and where to put our focus, whether that's in terms of stakeholder planning, whether it's in terms of making sure that we're not trying to boil the ocean with these things and we're putting the focus on where it needs to be, and really helping our customers through that process, as well as the process of operationalization. We don't believe that as an organization, the value that data governance brings is in managing the underlying tool sets. The value is all around the output and the outcome of that program. Whatever widgets are involved in making that work, yes, we all need to know about it, but actually that's not where the value is. The value is in that output and the outcome, and that's what we believe people should be focusing on. What we do as an organization is help manage that underlay for you so you can. So that's the first aspect. The second aspect is around discovery and classification here. So realistically, if you don't understand the data sets that you are storing using day to day, if you don't know what you've got, you can't possibly hope to handle it correctly. I don't think anyone would dispute that. It's not, it's a bit like the old analogy that that you used to have with firewalls years ago before next gen firewalls came to market. You know, it's Swiss cheese, and if we can't see what's going through it, then we can't stop it, or we can't treat it correctly. This is no different, really. If we don't understand our data assets and what's important to us, we can't possibly handle it correctly. If we can't handle it correctly, then you know what, we are likely to make a mistake and do something we shouldn't, and we are likely to miss out on unlocking some of that value that we've got within those data sets. From our perspective, we don't care what the data is. So whether it's structured, unstructured, whether it's in cloud, on premise, what we do is we'll give you one automated discovery engine that can automate classification and identify those critical data elements across the business. We feed that all into one place. It's one tool, it's one view. You don't need to have this multitude and plethora of tool set to go and manage that. Once we've done that, we have the ability to then start doing some interesting things around data management. So data retention, lineage, quality, DPIA, these sorts of things that come into that kind of data management category, if you like. By default, because we've done the discovery and classification, we build a business glossary, we build a data catalog, and then we can start applying policy. What we've tried to do as part of this is try to automate a lot of this as we move through, again, to try and take out a lot of the manual activity that's generally required. So if you take retention as an example, not only can we go and understand and discover those data assets, we map that against your retention policy, we can then take an automated action, whether that's delete the data, archive the data, de-identify it, encrypt it, whatever it may be, right? But again, that data management is a critical layer in unlocking that value proposition that we spoke about earlier. The last piece is more around privacy. So that's being able to support things like GDPR components like ROPA and DSARs, PIAs, those sorts of things. Really, again, it all comes back down to this discovery and classification bit. So we need to understand the data, we need to classify it, we need to manage it correctly, and then we can apply the right privacy controls to it. Where this becomes super interesting, linked back to this value creation aspect, is if we've done these things, if we have this platform in place, we can then start doing some really interesting things around federated data access, for example. So, you know, how do we then automatically provide or allow you to provide access to data assets to people within the organization in a secure way without manual intervention? Now, when you're trying to do that at scale, that's a real big challenge, really big challenge for people. So essentially what we're looking to do here is give you one single view into that governance piece in a service-orientated approach. And in doing that, what we're able to do is accelerate adoption, accelerate the program delivery and time to value. We do all of that within your environment, not ours. We don't move, we don't copy data, none of that. It's all within your four walls, so to speak. And the idea is that we're able to remove some of that operational burden, that resource fatigue that goes with delivering these programs, generally speaking. All of that is with our team working as an extension of yours. And that's the overall premise. So that really concludes what we're talking about today. Now, from a follow-up, if anyone's, I see one person's raised a question, which I'll respond to shortly. But in terms of next steps, if you would like more information, we have both infographic and long form document of the survey results, which we're more than happy to share with you. We'll send a follow-up email post this with some of those assets in for you. Equally, if you'd like to understand more about how we're doing this, as one person's already asked, they're more than happy to have a conversation around that and share some information and detail around that. If anyone's got any other questions, I'll just hang on the line briefly. Feel free to raise them in the box provided. It looks quiet. So with that in mind, I will thank you for your time. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully it was useful, and we'll share the follow-up information with you in due course. But thank you for joining us.